my awareness shifted to be more of a witnessing observer of my thoughts, which suddenly changed my identity, because instead of identifying with my thoughts, which were all that training and conditioning that I was talking about earlier.
Welcome back to the Work Positive Podcast, coaching you to create a culture that grows people and profits. I'm Dr. Joey, and if you're anything like me, between life and work today, there's just so much pressure. For me, it's pressure to be a great son to both my parents as their medical POA, navigating end-of-life care for them. Pressure to be a great husband, great dad, and pops. Pressure to perform at my best with my company, doing this podcast for you, writing a short book for you every month as an executive coach and culture architect, serving my clients. And then there's AI, right? Hey, you've got your list too, and the list just keeps getting longer, right? So how well do you stay calm, focused, and purpose-driven under all of this pressure? My guest today teaches others how to cultivate an unbeatable mind to develop mental toughness, emotional resilience, and conscious leadership. He retired from a 20-year career as a Navy SEAL commander and is the New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The Way of the SEAL and founder of the Unbeatable and SEAL Fit training programs. He's trained thousands of leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, teams, and he hosts his own podcast where he explores peak performance, global leadership issues, and personal growth with world-class guests. You're going to want to listen to this show more than once, Work Positive community. So lean in, listen up, and let's learn how to create a work positive culture under pressure. On this episode of the Work Positive Podcast, Work Positive community, help me welcome Mark Divine to the podcast. Mark, I am so stoked to have you on, man. Thanks for being here.
Dr. Joey, thanks for having me, and it was great to meet you in our prep discussion.
Yeah, I absolutely
enjoyed it.
You know, I'm not so sure Dad told me about you, but I'm pretty convinced we were separated at birth. I really am. I absolutely love it. So no pressure living up to a last name like Divine, right?
Right. Sure.
But there's so much pressure today, Mark. It seems I feel like I should cue up Queen and David Bowie, Under Pressure, doom, 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 doom. Because, I mean, man, there's so much pressure today. You have discovered a way of helping yourself as well as so many thousands of others deal with this pressure and stay calm and focused and really lean into their best selves. Every superhero, Mark, has an origin story. So how did you become interested in how to stay calm and focused and become your best self under pressure?
It's an interesting question. It's not so much that I became interested in it. I just developed the skills. So people talk about it as if it's a character or if it's something, right, that you like an attribute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just it's an outcome of training. And I talk about this with my team and tribe, that if you're not training your mind, someone else is training it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the outcome will determine whether that training is effective or not. And in a crisis, you don't rise to the level of your hopes and expectations. You fall to the level of your training. And in a crisis, of course, we know that's when you get triggered into fight or flight or freeze, and you get flooded with all the hormones of that are going to help you, right? So it's a very beneficial thing if it's a real high risk situation, right? Your life is on the line.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we need to get really focused, and we need to shut off our senses from other things that could distract us, and we need that jump in energy that the adrenaline provides. But the problem is that your IQ and / decision making ability get literally cut almost in half. I mean, like statistically, if you have 120 IQ, if you get triggered into a fight or flight situation in a crisis, an acute crisis, your IQ is going to drop to like 75 or 80.
Wow.
When measured in terms of your decision making capacity. So now contrast that statement. That's just the way things are, with this notion that people aren't taught that training your mind is an important thing to do. They are literally funneled into a factory system that takes over the training of that mind. And so it gets conditioned for a particular set of circumstances that are beneficial to society, right? So instead of teaching people how to control their arousal response and how to control their attention and how to be radically focused and how to tap into their intuition and creativity and all the things that are absolutely necessary today, they're not taught any of that. In fact, they're taught that those things are just, you either have them or you don't. And so the vast majority of people are trapped in kind of a left linear, materialistic, and very narrow set of mental operating methods or modes. And then that training is further conditioned with just an onslaught of negativity, negative behaviors, even negative humor that's couched as funny, but it's just radically sarcastic and and negative, the negative news cycle, and so the ego brain / left linear brain mind of the West, especially the Western trained person, but it's really pretty much most of humanity, is statistically 5 times as it is positive. And so as a result of that, we are stuck in a state of constant crisis and fear mongering, and that leads to hyperarousal, where your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest digest function, literally atrophies and goes offline. So that's the normal state, right?
No, we don't know how to rest.
And that would have been me. I grew up probably around roughly the same time as you in the 60s and 70s. We didn't have as much distraction and constant fear. We had 3 TV channels. There was still a lot of fear and a lot of programming, but a lot of fear programming coming out of the church and in our schools and whatnot. But it wasn't anywhere near as much as it is today. So we even had an advantage. But that was my default mode too, kind of what I just described.
Yep.
So back to answer your question, it wasn't so much that I was interested in it, it's that I stumbled into it. When I was in New York City after graduating from Colgate University, I was looking for some physical training to do that was more integrated, like that could combine body and mind and spirit. I had done competitive athletics at Colgate. I was a competitive swimmer and I rode crew, and I found some mental benefit, but I had noticed my freshman roommate at Colgate had taken up karate, Shotokan karate, and when he was my roommate as a freshman year, he was a real jerk. Like he was mean to a lot of people, and he was had low self-esteem, and he was projected it out right as an arrogant person. And over 4 years, I watched him transform into a very respectful, very integrated, kind of peaceful and focused, determined black belt, heading off to Japan to teach English and to continuous studies.
Oh, wow.
Whereas, 4 years after, joining Colgate University, I was maybe a little bit fitter, and I had grown for 4 years, but I hadn't changed my very nature. And so I was curious about that. So I was also very physical when I was in New York City. I was going to NYU, get my MBA, and I was becoming a CPA, certified public accountant, working for Coopers and Lybrand. So I was really busy, night school, full-time job, but I found time to train and to work out in the morning with a like 6-mile run, and then I would go to the gym at lunch. And so then I was like, there's one more time I could train. Like I like to train 3 times a day. I don't do that anymore. I usually train twice a day now, but it's better than the SEALs. When I was in the SEALs, I trained all day long, every day. That's what we did.
Every waking hour. And
yeah, so
stayed awake for 36 hours, right?
That's right. No, 100. No, the Hell Week is 6 days nonstop training, no sleep.
Oh my God.
6 days.
6 days.
Whatever,
staying awake.
whatever 6 times 24 hours is. Anyways, back to my fun story. I was looking for martial art because I thought, well, something that could be really beneficial for me, because I too felt anxious, and I too had low self-esteem and lack confidence, even though I was doing all the right things. Because my conditioning told me these are the things to do, or else you're not successful. Just fear-based conditioning, right? If you have a good college degree, if you don't go make a lot of money, if you don't look good in a suit and climbing the corporate ladder, then you suck, and you're not. And that's the way I was trained. And I also grew up in a very negative household, very sarcastic father, angry rager, alcoholic environment, and so that had an impact on me. So I wasn't very happy, and I just, in the back of my mind, I just remember the transformation that Dave had, and so I was ready for something. And, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. It's exactly what happened to me. I found it like a block from my home. And it wasn't just some like martial arts studio like we have here in California tucked into a strip mall. Like this was the world headquarters, right, of a school called SETA with a way of sincerity that already had 300,000 students worldwide after only 10 years.
Wow.
And the founder was Tadashi Nakamura, was a national hero in Japan for accepting a challenge from the Thai kickboxers, saying that they were the preeminent martial art. And so these three Japanese were the only ones who took him up on the offer. And Nakamura went over there and kicked ass in the tournament. And the other one of his teammates won theirs, and so they won 2 out of 3.
Mm.
Came back, had a ticker tape parade. But anyways, his teacher sent to the United States to head up a program called Kokushai. Now, his teacher was famous for cutting the horn off of a charging bull with his hand. Yeah. And
What?
so I walked into the studio with
With his
Nakamura. First
hand?
of all, yep, I
Oh.
was utterly transfixed by what I saw with this individual because he was unlike any human being I'd ever seen. Now, I obviously didn't grow up with a great father figure. I love my father; he's a great guy. If you listen to this podcast, which you won't, I love you, Dad, but you weren't a great role model with your negativity and your anger and all that. So, but what I saw with this guy was unbelievable spontaneity, presence, things that I now know are the accretion of long practice, and we could use the term mastery, right? So he had attained mastery over his body, mind, and spirit,
Mm.
and an integration of all those three, and to be able to show up very different than most 99.999% of humanity. And what was really cool about that is I recognized that that was through his own efforts. He wasn't born that way. He wasn't like the Dalai Lama plucked out of you know,
Mm.
some family at 5 years old and said, "You're special." And then he spends
Right.
his life acting all special.
Mm.
No, this is an individual who trained his body and mind and spirit over many, many years to be able to achieve this level of growth and integration. That was extremely inspiring and also eye-opening to me. And then I saw him his own like quasi miracles, like in Madison Square Garden at the 10th year anniversary. I saw him take 5 blocks of ice, each one like 10 inches thick, stacked on top of each other with just a tiny little wooden, like slab in between them. Standing in front of this thing, right? He goes very silent. The whole auditorium is silent, and then all of a sudden you hear this just incredible sound, and he just thrusts his head forward and shatters the ice with his forehead.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and then he does the same thing with his shin through another stack of ice. He just shatters these huge. If you or I tried to do that, it would literally we would kill ourselves or
Yeah,
shatter our leg.
absolutely.
So, but back to the story, I started training there with him. He became my head teacher. Every class I could that he'd teach for the white belts, I'd be there. And then I noticed after watching a black belt class one Thursday that a small group of senior black belts stayed behind. They lit a candle and they pulled out these wooden benches and they sat on these benches and they closed their eyes. And I'm like, what are they doing? First of all, you got to get out of here. That's the Zen class. I said, what is Zen? He says, oh, that's mental training. He didn't say it's meditation. He said, that's mental training.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, well, that's why I'm here. I want mental training. Can I join that class? And they're like, oh, I don't know. You have to talk to, Kaicho is the grandmaster. You have to talk to Kaicho. And they said, you can read this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by named Suzuki. So I got the book and I read it. And it was the first time I had been exposed to this idea that you could train yourself to be able to achieve extraordinary things with your mind. Of course, what they were pointing toward was enlightenment. I didn't understand what that meant. It sounded better than the state of fear-based anxiety, shame, guilt, and low self-esteem that I experienced every day, though. So I asked Nakamura if I could start training in the Zen class. And surprisingly, he said yes. So I was the only white belt. This guy had over 1,000 students at this headquarter, alone, and only like 10 of them were in this class. That's how unknown or unpopular meditation was back then. So at 21 years old, I started training meditation alongside my physical training of martial arts and also my athletics.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple things I want to kind of double click on here. Commensurate with the martial arts training was learning how to use the breath to develop power to be, yeah, to explode with force, to control your arousal response and stay calm, right? To
Mm-hmm.
generate heat, to cool yourself down. It was crazy how many different ways we learned to use the breath. And that was also new to me. Because again, nowadays I'm like, why didn't they teach us that in grade school? One of the most
Yeah.
extremely valuable things is to actually
Mm-hmm.
learn how to breathe instead of breathing unconsciously. So I learned how to nostril breathe. It was very important that we don't breathe through our mouth unless you have to. The only time you have to is if you're talking a lot, like I am, or giving a speech, or if you're extremely winded, in which case your main need is to get back to nostril breathing. And we don't have time. I could give a class just on that, but so obviously we don't have the time for that. So I learned that from Nakamura through the physical training, but then that came over into the Zen training because the very first set of instructions that we had in Zen, which is concentration training, basically for whole mind integration, was to inhale through your nose to roughly a 5 count and exhale through your nose for roughly a 5 count, deep diaphragmatic nostril breathing. And when you do that, just focus radically on that. Don't focus on anything else and count 1 and then try to do it again and count 2. And your goal is to get to 10. But you can't think about anything else. You just focus on that. You hold your attention on that. Inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale. Well, sounds easy, doesn't it?
Until you try
Until you
it.
try it, yeah. And at first, I found that I was tricking myself. I'd get 10, concentrating on that, and I'm like, yeah, that's not hard. But then when I was honest, I'd be like, I was also thinking the whole time.
Yeah,
So
that's.
it took some time to develop that capacity to actually really hold my attention on that one thing over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing was retraining my automatic breathing to basically slow down to roughly 6 breaths per minute, which 25 years later, academic research came in and said, guess what? The ideal breathing for human health and longevity is 6 breaths a minute through your nose.
Mm.
And we were doing this, we discovered this back in 1985. And because of that, it wasn't just on the bench. That became because we did it every day. And then I took it every morning after my run. I would sit for 20 minutes. That became my natural breathing state. And it's never deviated from there since then. Well, that breathing pattern, this is going to answer your question, which I'm finally getting to with this great story, is what led to the ability to control my arousal response. And it reactivated, it basically brought back online the parasympathetic nervous system, which had been atrophied or kind of like down through all the anxiety and stress of my childhood
Mm.
through trauma and abuse.
Mm.
And so suddenly I found myself really calm and the anxiety went away. And I could hold my attention and concentrate more, which had great benefits for my school. So I graduated from Colgate with 2.8. I graduated NYU with like close to a 4.0. And I give it all to the meditation and the breath work. It
Mm.
made me smarter. It
Mm.
made me more attentive and it made me more focused and it made me calmer.
Mm.
So I trained with him for 4 years. The meditation had other benefits, right? It showed me over time, not quick, but I would say about a year into my training, maybe a year and a half, I had suddenly a radical shift in perspective where I could see um, that I was my thoughts. I could see thoughts happening in real time, and I could observe them. So I took on this observational quality.
Yes.
My awareness shifted to more of a witnessing observer of my thoughts, which suddenly changed my identity because instead of
Mm.
identifying with my thoughts, which were all the training and conditioning that I was talking about earlier, that were trained and conditioned by my parents and by my school and by my peers and by the news
Right.
and the media I watched and by
Mhm.
religion and et cetera. All of that I could see just as a bundle of thoughts and memories, but it wasn't who I was because I was now the observer. I was witnessing all that.
Mm.
And so that led to my midlife crisis at 22 years old, where like I'm like, holy shit, here, what if, yeah, like you that song, this is not my beautiful home, this is not my beautiful life, like
Right. Right.
this is not my life. What am I doing here, trying to become a CPA when I have no interest in accounting or what I'm doing? what am I doing in New York wearing a suit? I can't stand being in big cities and being in a suit, being in an office or a cubicle. What am I doing?
Mm,
Whose
mm,
life is this? I never thought to ask those questions until I started meditating and started being able to reflect, self-reflect into stories as stories that
right.
weren't my story. It was a story, but I just happened to be a character living it out.
Mm,
And if I thought that was not my story, I could change my outfit, change my character, and create a new story. So that led to the dangerous question: if that's not who I am, then who am I really?
mm.
And I didn't have an answer. So I just sat and meditated on that. Right. This is where my meditation merged with contemplation, right, and journaling. So now all these practices, which we can talk about separately, actually all work together, right, in
They
this kind of
do.
hand in glove
They're an
manner.
integrated whole.
Right. And so I started to ask that question: who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What am I passionate about? What do I value? And I'm 22 years old, and no one ever taught me to ask those questions. And so I started to ask the questions. And when I would get some answers, clarity through journaling slash contemplation and reading, but most of it, a good 90%, came from my meditation. And that came when I could get really, really still,
Yeah, and quiet your mind and breathe.
really quiet my mind. And so
Mhm.
the practice of one thing, which is a concentration practice, they call it dharana in the yoga tradition. It will quiet your mind because you train your mind to just to be interested in that one thing, and then all the other things that you used to energize, because what you give attention to grows. So if you're
Yep.
paying attention to these other thoughts and all the bullshit that's going on, then
Mhm.
you're just energizing it. You like keep on spinning the flywheel.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you take your attention off of them and you focus on that one thing, the breathing pattern, then all that stuff starts to slow and die down. And also, you develop that witnessing capacity where now you're like, why would I want to engage with that bullshit? Right?
Mm.
That's not even a positive thought. So let it go. It's not a productive thought. So let it go. Just keep turning away, turning away, turning away. Started to get really calm and still. And
Mm.
then with the moments where I'd drop off into, like a timeless presence. And
Mhm.
that's where I would come back with the juiciest insights.
Yeah.
And I started to come back with this insight that I was a warrior. I was meant to be a warrior. That was my
Mm.
overarching calling slash purpose.
Mhm.
And so that led to kind of the next layer of inquiries. Like, okay, now if that's who I am, I'm a warrior, and it was very much of an archetypal energy. It wasn't like I'm a Navy SEAL. It
Right,
was
right.
I'm a warrior. The Navy SEALs, like, that's what you do if you're a warrior. But there's other ways, there's other things you can do, you know what I
Right.
mean, as a warrior. But a
Mm.
warrior is a warrior. That's the essence, right? So the essence
Mhm.
of your being, that information lies within you. What you do with it is going to be based upon what interests you, what excites you, what your passions are,
Mhm.
and maybe what your body and mind skills are. But the essence of who you are, right, you could say is your soul's calling or your heart. And
Right.
when you get really quiet, you can discover that. It'll
Mm.
reveal itself to you. So
Mm.
that's what happened to me. It revealed itself to me.
Yeah.
And so then I had to sit with the question, well, if I'm a warrior, how? Like how do I show up as a warrior? Is that as a CPA? I didn't I didn't rule out that possibility. It just didn't
Right.
seem legit for me. And this is also where synchronicity, kind of like the synchronicity of when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Synchronicity is when you get close to your calling, the universe
Yeah.
lines up to show you the way. The path
Right.
lights up for you.
It appears for you.
It
Yeah.
appears for you. The path lit up for me by stumbling across the Navy recruiting, and I wasn't looking at the Navy, but I walked past the Navy recruiting station, and there was a poster there in the window, and the poster title said "Someone Special." I didn't feel very special. I was
Ah.
feeling better about myself from all the meditation, but I didn't feel special. And I thought
Mm.
that'd be kind of cool to be special like that. What a great marketing banner for a traumatized young man, by the way.
That's
they know
right.
they
That's
really
awesome.
know what they're doing.
Yep.
And it had pictures of Navy SEALs doing cool shit. It didn't say anything about the SEALs. I had to go into the recruiting office the day and say, guys on that poster, right? Who are they? And they
Ah.
just started laughing. They're like, "Oh yeah, we got you. We got your hook."
The poster did you
And then they're like,
good.
"Yeah, you don't want to be one of those guys, but we could really use you over here." And and what they were doing was, I mean, they were using this. They to this day they use SEALs as bait for recruiting, as
Mm.
sizzle on the steak, knowing that 95, almost 99% of the
Yeah.
guys who are like, yeah, that's what I do, can't make it or won't make it.
Mm-mm.
Right. And back then in 1987, this is all happening to me. I think the SEALs were about 700 people strong.
Mm.
700.
Mm.
That's all. And
Mm.
now today, they're only 2,000 strong, a little over 2,000. It's an extremely small and elite unit.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, you know what? That's what I want to do. And I want to be an officer. And they started laughing again, like, dude, so you got a better chance of becoming an astronaut than that. But good luck. Seriously, they take 0 or 1 person a year out of the civilian community to be an officer in the SEALs.
Right.
All the officers, and maybe they take 10 a year,
Mm.
come from Naval Academy or our Reserve Officer Training Corps. So they're already in the Navy for 4 years,
Mm.
learning
Mm.
the ropes.
Right.
I said, no, I'm going to do that. I want to be an officer and I want to be a SEAL. I want to be a SEAL and I want to be an officer because I'm going to have an MBA. It makes sense. Although it's interesting, Joey, today when I train SEAL candidates, I have guys with college degrees or even masters come to me and they said, you know what do you recommend? And I say, well, it's still really hard to become an officer in the SEALs, but I highly recommend you actually become an enlisted guy for one tour and then go through an officer accession program because it'll make you a better officer to have that enlisted experience. If
Yep.
you're really doing this to be a top warrior, do that. If you're doing it just to learn, that you just to say you were a Navy SEAL, then it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? And you shouldn't even try, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because
Oh, I know.
the
It's
SEAls don't want
disingenuous.
you there.
Right.
Anyways, I know I've been talking on, but your original question was what gave my interest
Mm-hmm.
in these principles? Well, started with Nakamura, and it was the skills that I developed, the ability to control my arousal response and stay radically calm, right? And to be able to have distance between my thoughts and my emotions, to be able to be non-reactive. Like everybody wants that, and I was developing it literally in real time through stress testing with martial arts, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously through Navy SEAL training. The ability to concentrate on the task, but not get overwhelmed with the totality of it.
Mm.
I learned that in SEAL training. Like that was like the first thing we had to learn. It was like, don't think about 9 months of this every scorched earth days,
Just
12
do
hours of
today
nonstop
today.
physical. Yeah, you just got
Yeah.
to take a day to day. And then within the day, you don't think about the totality of what you have accomplished today. You just take it
No.
one evolution at a time.
Yeah. One
And
minute at a time
sometimes, when
sometimes.
it's
So.
Hell Week, Hell Week is six
Yeah.
days. You just take it. You just go to.
Mm.
So you chunk everything down in these micro goals, but you stay radically focused on doing the best you can. And then the next thing I learned is because of this principle of yin and yang and this, this idea of and recovery and
Mm.
push and pull. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
I learned how to a lot accomplish and put a tremendous amount of energy or something, but also to pull back and to
Mm.
recover and to relax and to calm myself through my breath and through stretching and recovery and hydration and all these things that are necessary to have a really balanced approach so that you're ready when you need to be ready, but you're relaxed and restoring when you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I learned that as well. All in net, I went to SEAL training class 170. We had a hardcore fit, ready to go, gung ho guys standing
Uh-huh.
tall with me in day one. And I'm looking up and down the line, going, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. Some of them were former Marines, former, Green Berets there. And a
Uh-huh.
lot of them were out of the fleet. Some of them, a lot of them off the street. I mean, just hardcore guys.
Right.
And when we were done, 9 months later, there were only 19 of us from the
Wow.
original class.
Mm.
And I was number one graduate. And
Mm.
I had, and my small team all graduated. My small team is 6 that put us together, the boat group. We got through it all together because I taught them, we practiced these skills. We were really positive, really focused. We had a clear vision of what we were to do, and that was to graduate. And we were calm. So that's what got me interested in teaching these things, right?
Mm.
It
Yeah.
was my own work with it, the success I had in the SEALs, working these principles both for myself and with a small select of others who didn't think it was weird, and then getting out and developing a program to SEAL Fit Mind to be able to teach these principles to others.
to others. Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, Let me ask you a question. What if the key to growing your work culture hides in plain sight? Take the free Work Positive Culture Assessment to discover it. Get insights in less than 4 minutes that transform your culture so you grow people and profits. You just answer 13 simple questions and discover your culture stage, strengths, and personalized next steps. Get your free aha culture moment at workpositive.today. Go to workpositive.today right now. Mark Divine is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. And speaking of unbeatable minds in your training programs, that's the website that the Work Positive community can go to, unbeatablemind.com, to learn more about your training programs there. And then when they go to markdivine.com, what are they going to discover there?
well, that's just my personal website where
Uh-huh.
I do a lot of speaking now for corporations and leadership training, and we bring these principles and skills, which I really couch as Unbeatable Mind. I mentioned this to you yesterday. All these things come together, and it's not just like
Mm,
Navy SEAL mental toughness, how to be
right.
focused and hard. There's a fair amount of that, but what we develop is an integrated vertical development program that changes who you are, your consciousness, your awareness, your perspective, and it gives you all these skills, right? This because the skills are just the outer expression of the inward
Of
journey,
the
and the
inner
inward journey
experience, right?
is an opening and use basically the capacity to use your mind in significantly different ways than we've been taught. You've
And
heard the cliche that we only use 5% or 10% of your brain. Well,
uh
that's not true. You actually use all of your brain. You just don't use it very effectively, and you're not tapping, right? You're not tapping into the full potential and power. So that's what I teach.
Mm.
An Unbeatable Mind, you can learn about my books and my podcast where I explore these topics. That's markdivine.com. But Unbeatable Mind is the program. I don't want this to sound like an advertisement, but it's the
No, you don't
program.
sound, because the work
Yeah.
positive community is greatly engaged with and enchanted with this story, because so much of what we do at work today is we buy the lie, as Scott Peck would say. We
That's
buy the
right.
lie that somebody else is writing our story, and so we buy those stories, as opposed to redefining work so that work
Right.
becomes that expression of our true identity. So that's why I want to turn
Definitely.
the work positive community on to the unbeatable mind. So let me ask you for your one thing, Mark. What's one thing that you would recommend to the work positive community to do today to take an unbeatable mind and bring that right into work and create that kind of work positive culture? One thing that they can do starting
Oh,
today.
that's one thing. Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, developing yourself so that we can have a work positive culture requires personal commitment to your own growth, to development, and that requires practice. But it also requires a team commitment to growth, and that requires practice. It also requires that the organization support that individual and collective development and growth.
Mm,
And that requires the leadership to be involved and to remove the barriers. So it's a threefold, I call them the three spheres: the I, the we, and the it have to all be in alignment and supportive. Now, back to your direct question. If you're the CEO or group team leader listening to this, then there's two things you can do. One is start your own practice. Now, if you have a practice, great. What do I mean by practice? You're doing something to deliberately evolve yourself, and you're doing it every day in a ritualistic manner.
mm,
Morning ritual, evening ritual, and maybe certain little times during the day, which I call spot drills. The most important foundational practice, and I'll just put it out for everybody, is breath control. Exactly what I started with Zen. And I
mm,
teach it as box breathing. In fact, I
mm.
popularized the term box breathing by starting to teach that to Navy SEALs in 2006 when I launched SEAL Fit. And it was fully based upon what I had learned from Zen, but I added a controlled hold after the inhale and the exhale. And I did
Mm.
that during SEAL training, and I found it had extremely positive benefits. Later on, I learned that it was pretty common through the yoga traditions to have controlled breathing, right? It's like any really competent yoga system will teach you controlled breathing like this, where you like alternate nostril breathing, Inhale for a certain number of counts, hold for a certain number of counts, exhale for a certain number of counts. Each one of these patterns having a different effect on your physiology and your psychology. So the number one most important thing that everyone could do individually is to begin a practice of box breathing every morning and every evening. I recommend 20 minutes a day in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. If that sounds like a lot, ask yourself, what are you doing during those 20 minutes anyways, right? Why not just pause and
Right.
instead of doom scrolling, just take control of your breathing. Inhale to a 5 count, hold your breath for a 5 count, exhale to a 5 count, and hold your breath for 5. If that sounds like too much, take it down to a 4 count, right? But ultimately you want to get to 5 because that will give you the benefit of that 6 breaths per minute when you're not doing the holds. It's 3 breaths per minute when you are doing the holds, but the holds stop your mind. Right? Think about what is the mind? The mind is thinking is movement. Movement corresponds with the breath. The breath affects your mental movement and your emotional movement. Right? So like if you're really anxious, got a lot of emotions running, your breath is going to be shallow and it's going to be rapid. And your mind is going to be racing, and that's going to be experiences
anxiety. Exactly.
by slowing your breathing down and breathing through your nose, it will calm everything down and it'll slow everything down. But then you hold the breaths after the inhale and after the exhale, and all of a sudden everything comes to a stop for a moment. And you practice this, and then you get very, very comfortable with that mind just pausing. And that's where the stillness comes in. And I honestly think that stillness is the master skill. The ability to find stillness is the master skill for any executive or any leader, right? Because that's where insight and creativity and intuition and all these masterful things come in. So that's the number one thing. And then to bring this to your team. So companies that I work with, we have them box breathe together before important meetings, for instance. And it has great benefit. That's my one thing.
I love it.
And do it. I challenge people, do it for 30 days and prove me wrong. Even if it's just at an individual level, just do it. Be a study of N equals 1. Do it for 30 days. If you can box breathe for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening for 30 days, that alone could transform your life.
Well, just get in bed 20 minutes before when you normally do in the evening and get up 20 minutes before you normally do. I love it. Mark Divine's been my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Go to LinkedIn, connect with Mark there, go to markdivine.com, subscribe to his podcast on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen to fine podcasts, and be sure to go to unbeatablemind.com and avail yourself of the training programs there. Mark, I'm certainly better for this conversation, and I know the Work Positive community is too. Thank you so much, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm so grateful you joined our conversation about creating positive work cultures that grow people and profits. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn today. Just search for Dr. Joey Fawcett, or you can click the link in your show notes. When you send your connection request, mention you're a Work Positive Podcast listener, because I want to give you a free digital copy of my Work Positive Team Edition book. It's a $19.95 value, but I want to share it with you free because it contains practical strategies that I personally use with clients to transform toxic work environments into thriving cultures. We explore in that book how to create a positive work culture, and we do so again in every episode of this podcast. Our LinkedIn connection allows you and me to directly talk about your specific challenges, so feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. I personally read and respond to all those messages because I genuinely care about your work positive success. So go to LinkedIn and let's connect. Remember to mention you're a podcast listener to receive your free Work Positive Team Edition book. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Work Positive Podcast.